Hello! So today I'm going to be talking about Foster Dade Explores the Cosmos by Nash Jenkins. A debut novel released last year and one in which I had heard absolutely, and I mean absolutely, nothing about. Until someone commented on my best books released in 2023 video saying that this book was one of their favourites of the year. It's based around themes of coming of age, drug abuse, school/education, social dynamics, privilege, power, social media, and outsiders. It's a sprawling novel about a tragic scandal at an American prep school. And the novel is told in the form of a literary investigation with a distinct millennial lens. Foster Dade arrives at Kennedy, an elite boarding school in New Jersey. The year is 2008, and the internet as we kind of know it now is slowly emerging at that time, mainly social media and its power over social groups. Foster is a transfer student to Kennedy, and due to issues with his family, mainly his dad, it has all left him as a rather anxious human being. But Foster soon finds himself in the company of Annabeth Whittaker and Jack Albright, both at the centre of Kennedy's social gravity. They take Foster under their wing to navigate the different cliques and social politics at Kennedy. However, 18 months later, Foster will be expelled. It is the job of this novel's nameless narrator, a narrator who inherits Foster Dade's old dorm room, to find out who Foster really was and why what happened to him happened. Our nameless narrator is obsessed with Foster Dade, and he begins a years-long investigation into exactly what happened. And this whole novel is made up of our nameless narrator's findings. Interviews with former classmates, Foster's blog posts, playlists, text archives, and the narrator's own obsessive imagination. The reader is constantly playing a game over what is fact and what is fiction. What is our nameless narrator creating in his own head? What experiences from our narrator's own life is he putting into Foster Dade's story, the story that he is telling us, the story that we're reading? But what is also fact from the blog posts that Foster Dade himself wrote, or from the different diary entries, or from the interviews that our nameless narrator is doing? We are constantly playing this game of not really knowing what is truth, what is fact, what is fiction. I'm going to get this out of the way right now because it was one of my issues with the book, but I think it would make your reading experience a little bit better. This is a very long book. It is around 550 pages long, and it goes into immense detail. It's one of the things I absolutely loved about it. However, there is no way, absolutely no way, our nameless narrator would be able to investigate and find out the things that he is talking about, the story that he is telling us. It is just too intimate. It's just too many details at play that he couldn't have found out no matter how many interviews he did and how many blog posts he read. So you have to believe early on that he is making a lot of this up. And if you don't get on board with that, if you don't, because the novel doesn't necessarily tell you this, but if you don't accept the fact that a lot of this story is just being made up by our nameless narrator, then it has no plausibility whatsoever, because it would be impossible for our nameless narrator to figure these things out. I remember early on constantly playing that game, but how would our narrator know this? How would our narrator know this? It's impossible for the narrator to have known this. And the novel's not really jumping into the truth. The novel is structured as everything we're being told by the nameless narrator. Otherwise, it would have a more distinct writing style. So you just have to believe, just get on board early on, that a lot of what we're being told is just the narrator making things up. And to repeat, I was much happier when I just understood that this is our narrator filling in the gaps of his own imagination. And the more I got into the novel, because our narrator isn't that far away in age to Foster Dade, I imagine there being a lot of crossover between the two personalities. And actually the Foster Dade that we are being told about, that's being presented to us, it is almost like the nameless narrator presenting himself in that moment. It's also really good to know that this novel is a character study, an exploration of millennials, especially at the time when social media was starting to grow. There is also a really decent plot/narrative at play that keeps all those other aspects really, really interesting, but at its heart, this novel is a character study/exploration of millennials. This novel is also exploring social media and its kind of rise, really. We start the novel and most of the students have BlackBerries, and iPhones are only just starting to get introduced, and the idea of being able to capture everything and take pictures of everything and share it, and sort of online bullying and how online and social media shifts the power dynamics within social groupings, especially at school. We get to see that build really gradually throughout the novel. But I want to reiterate, this isn't a novel about social media. I know you think to yourself, oh, teens and social media, we've seen it, we've heard it, we've read it all before, which we have, but this is just one small aspect of it, but it is something the novel does quite well, and it is something that plays into the mental state of the characters in this novel. From what I can gather, I am about 5 years older than Foster Dade, but that doesn't stop our taste in music being identical. And it was a great little add-on because, of course, I started putting on those playlists as soon as I read them, and it took me right back to that time. I actually think there's a playlist for Foster Dade Explores the Cosmos on Spotify that has all the songs that are cited within the novel. If I can find it, I'll link it in the description box, but put it on, it's an absolute banger. So what did I like and what didn't I like? What I liked. The writing is focused and precise and flows beautifully all the way through. I absolutely adored the slow burn at play with this novel. It gave us such a strong connection to Foster Dade as a character, to all of the side characters. It gave us a really strong connection to location, to Kennedy. It gave us a really strong connection to the idea of the privilege of Kennedy students, the effect of drugs on those students, and the effect of social media on those students. The pacing was just done expertly all the way through. With that build, everything felt earned, everything felt realistic, and that is because Nash is taking the time to get us there slowly, to give us that connection and for us to feel that kind of anxiety of Foster Dade's character and to understand almost why the events are happening and how those events are affecting the different social dynamics throughout the school. Yeah, I just thought, I know that was all a bit rambly, but I just thought all of those elements were done brilliantly. I thought that Nash was able to tap into the emotional intensity of adolescence just really, really well. I really enjoyed the structure of this novel. I liked our nameless narrator having to piece together evidence to kind of tell Foster Dade's story, and structurally that made the telling of Foster Dade's story really interesting. And the final thing I loved, and I know I've already sort of talked about this, is that I just love how authentic this book felt. I'm a millennial, I'm not that far away from Foster Dade's age, and everything about it, his experiences, yeah, there was an authenticity there that I really, really connected with. Nothing felt sort of too far-fetched. The novel does go to some pretty extreme places, and that's what kind of keeps things interesting. But also remember, we are playing that game of what is the nameless narrator making up in this moment, and those are probably the moments that are a little bit more unbelievable, but that's what makes the novel interesting as a whole. But overall, his experiences, yeah, it felt really authentic. Now, of course, I didn't have the same upbringing as Foster Dade and all the kids at Kennedy Prep School. They are all kids from very, very wealthy families. They are very, very privileged students, which is why they're able to sort of get hold of drugs and things like that very, very, very easily, or at least in large quantities. But yeah, so I didn't have that kind of experience, but it's all the things that wrap around it, the social dynamics, that introduction of social media, of grappling with it, of understanding the power of social media. All of those things within this novel just felt very, very real to me. Yeah, I just related to them pretty hard, everybody. What didn't I like? Here's the thing, when you boil this novel down to its kind of core elements and what it's trying to say, what is this book about? It is absolutely nothing we haven't read or heard before. And the next thing I'll comment upon is that the novel didn't really surprise me much as far as the plot or the narrative or where it went. Everything that's happening is fairly predictable. The novel's not really about that. It's not really a kind of like a whodunit suspense type thing, but it is set up with a framework of an investigation, a nameless narrator piecing these things together to kind of find out exactly what happened. And we're not overtly told exactly what happened at the start. All we know is that Foster Dade got expelled and we are figuring those things out. But halfway through the book, you would have predicted exactly why he gets expelled, and you won't be wrong because it's really, really obvious. And as I said, the novel isn't really about that. It's an exploration of character, but that element is in there, and it just didn't really surprise me that much. I just would have liked a few more surprises, you know? Now, I thought this book was pretty damn close to being exactly the length it needed to be. Now, I enjoy really long books, and I felt like we needed to spend the time with Foster Dade, getting to know him and his friends to really get a grasp and a connection to him so that we really cared. I'm not going to lie, I finished this book last week, and I am still thinking about many, many elements of this book. However, this book does go off on little tangents. Some of them I really, really enjoyed, and I felt they really added to the themes of the novel and what the novel was exploring, but there were a couple in there that just felt unnecessary, like they were bogging it down a little bit. So I do think that maybe there was a dincy-wincy little edit to be done. There were just a couple of things, couple of tangents, and I went, did we need that? Was that absolutely needed? not really, not when the payoff for what we went through was a very tiny element of the novel's progression. So yeah, I mean, that's me being really nitpicky, but that was one thing that I was a bit like, yeah, a couple of those we could have done without. But that's it for my dislikes. Overall, I thought this book was excellent. However, your mileage may vary, as I'm a millennial. I'm a very early millennial. I'm on the sort of cusp, but I am a millennial, and I spent most of my life without technology. Okay, let's stop right there, because to make the statement I spent most of my life without technology is an out and out lie. What a load of horseshit. I had so much technology around me when I was growing up. I had an Amiga, a Spectrum, a SNES, a Sega Mega Drive, a Game Boy, a Game Gear. I had all of these things growing up, all these computer systems. Me and my brother would share different. We were really lucky to have all that technology. I had TV, I had VHS player. I remember getting the VHS tapes and taking the little tab off and then sometimes sticking bits of sellotape over that little gap so I could re-record stuff over the VHS tape. I had so much technology around me growing up. What I was trying to say is that I didn't have the internet until quite late in my adolescence or my youth. I didn't get a mobile phone, or if you're in the States, a cell phone, until I was around 16, 17 years old. I think I had my first one, and it was a brick. And I can never really remember throughout my life when the internet started coming into play, but I only ever remember properly using the internet when I was it was like the year 2000, 2001, 2002, when I started understanding the power of what it could do. Now, I understand it's a bit late, but just where I grew up in the world, my friends and everyone around me, it is really the sort of like late 90s, like 99, 2000, 2001, that the internet started having any kind of like an impact, or at least on social groups and things like that. Anyway, I'm rambling now, but all I wanted to say is, yeah, I had loads of technology around me growing up. That is a lie, what I said. What I meant to say was, yeah, I didn't have, like, the internet wasn't around until I was, I was well past my adolescence. My hobbies and things were going out on my bike, going to the skate park, going to the woods, climbing trees, that kind of, basic thing that we spout on about when we talk to the young generation. But that was my upbringing. And at university is when Facebook was introduced. So I was at university, Facebook came along, and it was really interesting to see what Facebook did to shift the dynamics of social groups at university. And also, like, kind of university and drugs being introduced to different social groups and that kind of thing. Very, very similar to what's happening to Foster in this novel. I know Foster in this novel is at school and I was at university, but yeah, there is a lot of crossover on what social media did at that time. So I think I am getting a lot more from this book. I wouldn't necessarily suggest this book to someone like a Gen X or a boomer. I wouldn't necessarily suggest this book as a way for you to really understand what being a millennial or the millennial generation is really like. I think there are other books that do it better. However, this is a good one for the idea of within the education system and kind of the changes that were happening in sort of like 2008 when Facebook was starting to really get going, when social media was starting to really show its power and its influence. Yeah, I think this is interesting for that aspect. So yeah, your mileage may vary with this novel, but for me, yeah, I just really enjoyed it and I thought it was excellent. I'm going to give it 4 stars out of 5. And as a debut novel, I think this is an absolutely fantastic achievement from Nash Jenkins, and I cannot wait to read what he does next. I can tell you right now, if I had read this book last year, it would have made my best books released in 2023 list without a doubt. So there you go. Have you read this novel? And if so, what did you think about it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Please let me know in the comments below. And as always, I hope you're well. I hope you're enjoying whatever you might be reading, and I will see you all on the next one.